In this video, I'll be sharing my 3 favorite jam press variations for amazing tricep gains and reduced joint stress. Now, for those who don't know, this exercise combines a skull crusher and close grip bench into one. Assuming a narrow position, you bring the forearm to your bicep, punch back up. Depending on your leverages and size, the form will look very different, and the truth is, no one does this exercise the same. So you really have to feel it out for the most comfortable form. That said, even when it's executed perfectly, there can still be some potential problems for a lot of people. What I'm specifically referring to in this case is simple alignment. When you closely grab a straight bar and bend that lower arm, you'll notice that the wrist is being forced to stay out, which is not the most comfortable position. What would be most natural in a pronated position is being right here. No deviation whatsoever in the wrist, but obviously we can't do that. Now, for a lot of people, this won't be a problem, which explains why they can still perform straight bar extensions. But for some, no matter what they do, the jam press will never feel right. So in this case, the easiest solution in the world is switching to an easy bar. And guess what? It doesn't compromise tricep gains in any type of way. Because what you need to understand is that wrist positioning does not bias different heads of the triceps or increase activation in any type of way. All it could do is be easier on the joints depending on your alignment. So when you see all these guys recommending reverse grip pushdowns because that's somehow magical, they're bullshitting you, or they simply don't know better. So when we switch to the easy bar JM press, it's the same thing. It makes sense, the elbow's a hinge joint. And to give you another example that really highlights what I'm saying is one that was used by Joe Bennett, creator of the Hypertrophy Coach YouTube channel. He says that your elbow is like a door hinge. But if your kid is hanging off the doorknob and then you try to open and close it, that'll cause misalignment in the door itself. It'll be tilted more downwards. And what that can do long term is create little cracks in the wood or cause the door to not open and close smoothly. You'll absolutely see the damages of that effect. Whereas if there was nothing hanging off the knob, it would be in its natural position, doing what it has to do, and the longevity is preserved. Your elbows work in the exact same way, which is why the easy bar is so valuable in this situation. So if you've been trying to do the regular way for years and never could get it right, try this instead, and you may instantly feel the differences, and just stick to it all the way through. You may never want to go back after experimenting with these. So that's my first variation that everybody needs to give a shot. Secondly, let's discuss another variation that can be done with the straight or easy bar. What we're addressing right now is the elbow tendon stress itself. When you're in that deep position, stretching, you feel it. And it can take months of developing that proper tendon strength, which is why we're always going to recommend starting with an empty bar or even below that and progressively micro-loading your way up. This is never, and I must emphasize, you never want to rush the progress with this lift. In fact, it should take you a long time to hit your current extension number, even though right now you can go to the gym and easily surpass that amount. You need to fine tune that movement pattern and slowly build that tendon strength, which by default takes time. So once you finally surpass the original extension strength, that's what minimizes the joint pain. But it is true that even though you could take your time and do everything right, it is still hard. And that's where the chain jam press comes into play. In this way, we can still overload the movement, go extremely heavy. That's never going to be a problem. But now in the bottom portion, there is a deloading effect, which, depending on how your individual body is built, you can go heavier or lighter. Oftentimes, just adding 15 to 30 pounds of chains is enough to correct the strength curve. You don't have to go excessive and do 60 to 90 unless you're brutally strong, but just a little bit should be enough to get you moving really heavy loads without complaining that this exercise doesn't feel that good. Not to mention the fact that the carryover to other chain presses or any form of accommodating resistance is high. Anyway, everything about this variation feels right. Your triceps are going to get maximally pumped and you'll barely feel anything in the elbows. Like even less than doing the extension with chains. So if you want to make this as a full replacement, hey, for many of you that might be a viable option, just saying. Finally, let's talk about another elbow-friendly variation, the reverse band JM press. This is the equivalent of having someone press upwards on your elbows the entire time while you do the exercise. You're still going to fail, you're still getting progressively stronger, but it's a fixed resistance based off whichever band you're using. And I personally recommend incorporating the lightest tension possible. Micro mini band, monster mini. Don't go beyond this point. We're not trying to get a severe reduction. Maybe 15 to 30 pounds tops. This way, we're not fooling ourselves saying, oh, look, I could do jam press with 225 to 75 for reps. Bro, you got over 100 pounds of reverse band tension. That's not what I'm saying here. What it should be is if you can normally do 100-pound jam presses, maybe now you're doing 135 pounds, which from a hypertrophy standpoint, you probably won't see any differences whatsoever since it balances itself out from the assistance portion, but the tendon aspect is where we actually see the uniqueness. It's a similar strength curve to the chain variation, but the bottom portion is quite a bit easier. So from everything that I've shown you today, this is by far the least stressful on the joints. Now, for those who may ask, Alex, what about attaching the bands to the bottom of the power rack instead of the top, such that it's not reversed, but just a normal banded jam press? Is that good or bad? I would say it is excellent, but definitely an advanced move for most. I recommend getting very familiar with the chain and reverse band style before even attempting that, because what you now have are overspeed eccentrics. So you're fighting the negative very hard. The bands never stop pulling you down. As you go through the range of motion, that in itself is going to be hard, but the moment you hit this part here, the tension on the tricep tendon will be overwhelming, because even though the band is not closed in completely, at least 50% is still stretched out. So people think that, oh, if I'm doing 85 pounds of band tension, then it's zero at the bottom. Doesn't work that way. It's probably around 45 to 50. So even though you are getting a deloading effect, it's still a lot more aggressive compared to other variations. Like with the chains, most of it is going to close in at the bottom if you set it up correctly. Whereas with the bands, a lot more of that remains. So in terms of accommodating resistance, it's always going to be the most aggressive. And the truth is, if you did the reverse band version, you'd realize you probably don't have to do that in the first place. Like these are enough variations that I showed you. But I do plan on releasing a part 3 to this segment. The first was just introduction to the jam press. This was 3 more variations, and then the next one, I'm going to show you some other stuff that could be done. But that's really all you got to know. Easy bar, chain, reverse band. Try this out, and I think you'll be very happy with how your triceps develop while you don't have any pain in your elbows or wrists. Enjoy the gains, and I'll see you in the next segment.